Joseph and Emily met on a beach at sunset, the kind of meeting that felt like it had been plucked from a dream. She was sketching the waves, her hair tousled by the wind, and he was chasing his runaway dog, who had decided to investigate her art supplies. When their eyes met, it was as if the world paused, just for a moment. They laughed as the dog knocked over her easel, and that laughter became the foundation of everything. Their love was a whirlwind. They spent their early days exploring the coast, collecting seashells, and making plans for a future that felt infinite. Emily loved Joseph's steadiness, the way he anchored her when her thoughts raced. Joseph adored Emily's spontaneity, the way she made him feel alive. They married on the same beach where they'd met, the waves crashing in the background as they vowed to love each other forever. Years passed, and life settled into a rhythm. They bought a small cottage by the sea, a place where they could hear the waves from their bedroom window. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. Emily, an artist, struggled with self-doubt and the pressure to create something meaningful. Joseph, a marine biologist, became consumed by his work, spending long hours at the lab. One evening, after a particularly tense argument about Joseph's absence, Emily stood at the window, staring at the sea. "Do you even see me anymore?" she asked, her voice trembling. Joseph reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm here," he said. "I've always been here." But the distance between them grew, like the tide pulling away from the shore. The turning point came on a stormy night. Joseph had been working late again, and Emily, feeling lonely and unseen, sought comfort in the arms of an old friend. It was a moment of weakness, a desperate attempt to feel something other than emptiness. When Joseph found out, he was devastated. "How could you?" he asked, his voice breaking. Emily couldn't meet his eyes. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. I needed you, and you weren't there." The betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound that neither of them knew how to heal. They tried to move past it, but the trust was broken, and the love that had once felt unshakable began to crumble. One morning, as the sun rose over the sea, they decided to take a walk on the beach, a last attempt to find their way back to each other. The air was heavy with unspoken words, the silence between them louder than the crashing waves. Emily reached for Joseph's hand, but he pulled away, his heart still raw from the betrayal. "Do you remember," Emily began, her voice trembling, "the night we got married? You said, the sea would always remind you of me." Joseph nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "I meant it," he said. "But now it just reminds me of what we've lost." They stood there, the waves lapping at their feet, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. For a moment, it felt like they might find their way back. But then, Emily turned to him, her eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." Joseph wanted to say something, anything, to make it better. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded, his heart breaking as he realized this was the end. They separated soon after. The cottage by the sea sold to a young couple who didn't know its history. Emily moved to the city, throwing herself into her art, while Joseph stayed by the coast, his work becoming his only solace. Years later, they both found themselves back on the beach where they had met, drawn to the place where their love had begun. They stood a few feet apart, the years etched into their faces. "Do you ever wonder," Emily asked, her voice soft, "what would have happened if we'd fought harder?" Joseph looked at her, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. "Every day," he admitted. For a moment, it felt like they might try again. But then Emily smiled, a bittersweet smile that broke his heart. "I'll always love you," she said. "But some things can't be fixed." Joseph nodded, his throat tight. "I know." They stood there for a while, the waves crashing around them, before turning and walking away, each carrying the weight of what they had lost, and the memories of a love that had once been as vast and endless as the sea. Years later, Joseph would sit on the beach, watching the waves and remembering the woman who had been his everything. Emily, in her studio, would paint the sea over and over, trying to capture the feeling of a love that had slipped through her fingers. And though they had both moved on, the sea remained, a silent witness to a love that had been beautiful, broken, and ultimately unforgettable.